Let's give everyone just a few moments to drop in. I really need to give myself a countdown. All right, well, let's get this show on the road. Welcome, Houdini fans from around the world. It's 3 o'clock and it's Friday. That means it's time for another episode of Houdini Secrets Live. My name is Chris, and I will be your host for today's session. Now, we've been working on Houdini dynamics prolifically. And one of the biggest ways, or the most important ways, of getting any kind of dynamic simulation out of Houdini and into the real-time engine is using vertex caching. And I love using Houdini's vertex caching tool. It's called Vertex Animation Textures. And it is a way of exporting an FBX with a small handful of really important textures, which will actually do the vertex deformations actually within the vertex shader itself of the real-time renderer. And in order to get that all going, it's a pretty easy process, but the process does get to be kind of time-consuming after a while. So what I'm going to do this week, and actually next week, I'm going to go and demonstrate how to create an importer into UE4, how to import Houdini VAT simulations. It's going to take a two-step process because it's fairly involved, and honestly, it's taking me a little bit of a while to learn how to do it, and so therefore, you get what you can get. So today's lesson may not be that long, but there's a lot of really juicy content in here, and I think it's going to save you a whole lot of time. And if you get to start using UE4 Python, then it can actually speed up your overall pipeline and process significantly. All right, so let's take a look at what we're going to present today. Okay, we're going to show you how to import textures, and then when we import textures into that, let's see, do I want to start here? No. Internal path? No, I don't want to start that. Oh, golly. All right. Always something wrong. Anyway, here's my schedule for today. First, we're going to configure some Python. Now, for those of you who didn't know that UE4 does have a Python interface, it does, and it works pretty darn well. However, it does take some getting used to. It's not the friendliest interface in the world. It's not like using Sublime or Visual Studio or many of the other wonderful IDEs out there, but it does work. And so what we're going to do is get you started going with that. We're going to make sure that the plugin works, and then we're going to set up some search paths, which are real important. And then we're going to do a sanity check to make sure that it's all working and functioning before we actually go on to the actual programming of the import script. Now, on the import script, we're going to import and configure the components. That's going to be the focus for today. And we're going to show you how to do all that. Next week, we're going to show you how to build the materials. These are the two processes. So let's go ahead and go forth and work on converting into our UE4 session into a Python powerhouse. Okay, now you notice here that I've got my UE4 window kind of docked in here. I've got it tightened up here. I've got my content browser here with my output log parked right next to it. In case you didn't know how to get to the output log, you go to the Windows, and then you go to the Developer Tools, and then you choose the output log, and there you go. And you can drag and drop that. And I actually grab my message log and put it underneath here, so it'll give me any kind of information and warnings, as long as what the assets are pulling in here. And so the first thing you have to do is go ahead and turn on Python, because it's not on by default. What you do here is you go over to your settings, go over to your plugins, and then go ahead and look for scripting. Click on scripting, and then you got to make sure to turn on the Python Editor Script plugin. And we're going to click no. And well, actually, what I didn't want to start here. I didn't want to restart it yet. But I'm going to click on here and say yes. We want to turn the editor scripting utilities on. Say yes. And so no, we don't want to restart just yet, because we also need the Python Editor Script plugin. We need both of these. Say yes. Okay. Now, if you don't use both of these, then that doesn't empower a lot of the functions. I don't know why some functions turn on with certain utilities while others don't. I don't know. But this is the way that they work with that. Evidently, they have one more thing for using Python to programming sequences. Okay, haven't explored that at all. But once again, let's go ahead and hit the restart now, and then we're going to restart our UE4 session. And this is going to take a little bit of a while, but luckily this is a small, empty scene. Okay, here we go. I'm going to go ahead and get rid of that, and I'm going to park my window over here. Excellent. Now, we have the output log here, and as you can see, this little thing converted itself to Python, probably because I've been using Python out the wazoo. But you'll see that it starts off here in the command. And there are three options. You have your command, your Python, and your Python replacement thing. Now, I keep it right here on Python, and that allows you to enter one kind of command at the time. Now, just to make sure everything works, I'm going to type in a tiny little script. So print, and then inside parentheses and quotes, I'm going to put Houdini Secrets Live. Got to finish my quotes, finish my parentheses. I'm going to hit enter. And you'll see that in the log Python, it enters right here, Houdini Secrets Live. All right, now let's give it a little bit more of a robust test. For I in range 10. Now you're going to turn that. Now we're going to have to. This has to be more than one line long, but we can't enter more than one. So what do? Okay, you have to do a shift return in order to work on the next line. So I'm going to hit shift and then hit return, and you'll see it knocked down to the next line without doing a carriage return. So I'm going to hit tab. There we go. I'm going to hit tab, and then I'm going to print I. Oh, by the way, in case you are wondering, starting with UE4 version 4.26, UE4 comes equipped with Python 3. I believe it's 3.2. I think that's what it is. I could be wrong about that, but I believe it's 3.2, but either 3.5 or 3.7, one of those three. As I know, Houdini is 3.7, but UE4 is Python 3.2 at least. But anyway, I'm going to hit return, and then we see our little baby script just executed and just counted off 1 to 10. Okay, not a problem. Okay, but typing in the script like this is a real pain in the butt. So UE4 has, made its Python interface a little bit helpful, and they allowed you to use external files really simple. So here in an external file here, and I've got my Sublime checked in here. So I'm going to type in a little set, print. I'll call this external. I'll call this, tech art edu :HSL for Houdini Secrets Live. Okay, now I'm going to save this. Now, save it in a location where you know you're going to get back to. Now, I like to create a Python folder in my command, or in my contents folder, And this is where I'm going to put this. And since I have this project here, I'm going to put it in the Python folder inside of my contents. So I'm going to go save as and content. And there's my Python folder. And then I'm going to just do a, I'm going to call this shorty. Shorty.py. Okay, now let's go ahead and test this. So in order to execute the command, you just have to type in the full path. Let's see. You just have to type in the full path and then your file. So let me type in my full path. And then I called this shorty.py. So shorty.py, and then I'm going to hit enter. And there it is. TechArt edu, okay, Houdini Secrets Live. Okay, there it is. Okay, now this is pretty cool, but it could be better because I don't want to have to type in the path of this. I just want to go right to where my Python scripts are going. So you can modify the search path for your Python session right within UE4. So let's go ahead and once again we're going to check in settings, and now we're going to go to project settings this time. We're going to drop down to where it says plugins, and we're looking for Python. And then, okay, I already have one set here. Let me go ahead and nuke that. Yours says, so the startup scripts are going to be scripts that are activated whenever UE4 turns on. Okay, that's pretty cool. Now, additional paths are any other additional path that you might want. So I'm going to install the folder for my Python folder inside of my contents. And I'm going to go ahead and, oh yeah, here it is. Luckily, they provided a little file browser, so in case you don't want to, in case you go ahead and type in something incorrectly. Me? Type in something incorrectly? Never. So at TechArt edu, Houdini Secrets, UE4, here we go, Python VAT Importer, content, and Python. Okay. Okay, there's the full path right in there. Okay, now it says it wants to restart, so in order to get this going, you're going to have to restart. I'm going to click restart, and then we're going to restart yet once again. Okay, you're only going to have to do this once. So I'm going to get rid of that, and I'm going to dock this window. Okay, now, since I called this shorty.py, I'm just going to go ahead and then enter shorty.py, and then you'll see that it executed just fine. So it did follow through on the script for me, and it is ready to rock and roll. Okay, so now we've got our session configured up pretty good. Let's go ahead and create a brand new script to start working on importing our thing. But before we go, okay, I want to just do a test to make sure. Honestly, I've forgotten how to do multiple arguments inside of my command line. So I'm going to go ahead and create something brand new. So I'm going to create a new little function here. Type that in here. And so I'm going to import the sys module. I'm going to import the OS module. And then since I'm importing a bunch of stuff, I'm going to import the Unreal module as well. And then I'm going to go ahead and file save as, and then I'm going to call this import vat.py. Okay, import vat.py, save. And now I'm going to test to see if this works. Because what I'm going to do here is I'm going to list the number of arguments, so therefore it's going to find the length of the sys.argv parameter, and then it's going to tell me how many arguments I have in here. And then it's going to print out the string of the entire sequence. So we've got the sys.argv sequence, and then we're going to print out the entire contents of it. So let's see if this works. We'll go import. Oops, that's only import. Import vat.py, and then I'm going to send it more than one argument. I'll go arg1, arg2, and then arg3, and then hit enter, and there it goes. It said I got 4 arguments, and then it listed all of my arguments in one consecutive line. Okay, everything is working. This is good. Everything is working as expected. Okay, so let's go ahead and go over what we're going to go over today and take a look at the process that we're actually going to go through in then writing this script. Nope. There we go. So we're going to start off by importing the textures. Now, depends on how you export your VAT from Houdini. You could end up with just 2 textures. You could end up with as many as 5. It really kind of depends on the situation, or even more. So we want to load in all the textures that are currently available within the folder. And then once we import them in, then we have to take each individual texture, then we have to convert that texture into a vector map. By default, UE4 doesn't know, it has an idea of what to do with your information, but it's not quite sure. So it assumes that you're bringing in color information. But we have to tell it, oh, okay, we don't want color information, we're going to bring this in as vector information. Okay, then we're going to, once we do that and convert the colors to textures, then we're going to have to modify the filter. The filter has to be making sure that we're using the best optimal filter for this. And then, once we imported all the textures, we've got to import all the meshes. Once we've imported all the meshes, then we have to process and configure all the meshes. Now, the only thing that we're going to do at this moment in time is turn on the full precision UVs for all of the meshes. So that's to make sure that we're using the best and the most optimal information out of our UV parameters that are inside of the meshes, inside of the vertices. All right, so let's get marching and restart creating this script. Okay, so first I'm going to just create a test. I'm always testing it here because I'm always screwing up. So in order to prevent screwing up, got to make sure that I'm testing every process along the way. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to test to make sure that I've got 3 arguments. Because what I want here is I want to do the call of the command itself. I want to get the source location of where Houdini exported to the folder. I want to get that folder location, and then I want the UE4 destination. So I'm going to do the call, the source folder, and the destination folder. So I'm going to go ahead and replace all this. So there we go. I'm going to test my sys.argv and check the length. If the length is not equal to 3, then I'm going to print out a little bit of a usage information that says, okay, it's import vat.py, and I want the source path and then the destination path. So let's just test to see if this actually works. So I'm going to change this to source path vy. So I'm going to just say arg1, just arbitrarily. And then you'll see that I got a little warning. It says usage, import vat.py, source path, and destination path. So it's more or less working. All right, so the next thing we have to do, if it passes this test, then we want to import the VAT project. So I'm going to go and create a function for importing the VAT project. All right, So all we're going to do right now is we're going to import the VAT project. We're going to send it the source folder, which is in argument 1, and then the destination folder, which is in argument 2. And we're going to get pulled into our import VAT project function with the following inputs of source path and then destination path. And then all we're going to do is print out the information to just kind of give confirmation that we are doing what we want to do. All right, so I'm going to test this. And then I'm going to give the full path of my pre-generated VAT export. Now it's in the same project, but its path is a little bit long. Okay, so there's my export, and then space, and then I'm going to give the destination, I'm going to call it guard. So we've got a little guard character here, and you'll begin to see him in a little bit here. But I'm pulling in here's my call to the import VAT PY. Here's my source folder of where Houdini exported its VAT information. And here's my destination UE4 location. I'm going to hit enter. Aha, import VAT project is not defined. Okay. So I've got an error. Import VAT project is not defined. Okay. Let's see, where did I get a little typo in there? Me typos? Me never. Okay, so what do we got here? So let's see if this fixes it. Okay, there it is. It worked there. What it did was exported. It says, okay, importing VAT project. It here is the source location of the Houdini location, and we're pulling this into the guard folder. Okay, everything is working just fine. Okay, now, once again, more testing. I want to test to make sure that this is a valid folder. So all I'm going to do is drop into here. I'm going to throw in a little test. Oh, I don't want that indented. All right. So if not, the OS path is dir. So I just test to make sure that my source path is a valid directory. If it's not a valid folder, then I'm going to print out, hey, we don't have a valid folder, and then I'm going to return, and it's going to just exit the script. All right, very simple. Okay, now let's go ahead and import all of our textures. And so therefore, I'm just going to create a call here. Import textures. And then I'm going to give my source path and my destination path right on through. All right, so let's go ahead and create this, the import textures method. You can see I'm really kind of got a pattern going right here. So I'm using a lot of the same functionalities over and over again. So I've got import textures, my source path, and my destination path. My texture folder should be my source folder / textures, and then I'm testing to make sure that that folder is valid or not. And then if it's not valid, then I'm going to go ahead and print return. And so I'm going to print out then if it does return, so I'm going to just print out, say print text folder then. All right, now let's test to see if this works. Uh-oh, indented block. Okay. So where is my error? Line 17. Okay, here it is. So here's my stuff. I indented this block. Shouldn't have done that. All right, now let's test to see if this works. Okay, good. It exported my guards textures folder, and so now we are ready to start importing in some textures. We're ready to start importing in some texture paths, that is. So first we got to make sure and we got to figure out all of the folders or all the files that are inside of this folder. So what we're going to do is we're going to use the OS module, and then we're going to take all the contents of our folder, and then we're going to assign them to a sequence here. So textures equals os.list.dir, and then of the texture folder. And then for texture and textures, so we're going to process every one of these textures. What we're going to do is create the texture path for this, and then I'm going to import the texture here. Now, I haven't just explained how I'm going to import it yet, but I just want to put a placeholder here so, once again, so I can test this. So I printed that. Let's test again. Okay, so it says it's going to import guard waving norm, guard waving pause, and then guard waving pause 2.exr. So it's going to load 3 EXRs in. Okay, that's great. So things are working as expected. So now let's go ahead and create our texture loader. So I'm going to click on here. So with each one of these textures, I'm going to replace that print statement with my import VAT texture. So we've got the import. So let's import this VAT texture. I've got my texture path, and here's my destination. Now remember, texture path is the variable that we created here, which was a combination of our source path going through the textures and then for each of the individual entries inside of the directory contents. Then let's create our folder up here. Okay, here's my method. I've got import VAT textures. I've got the file name and then my destination. Okay, so my destination, I know it's got to start at game. /game is a UE4 standard. Whenever you have a folder, it just kind of assumes that /game is the root. And so that's just something that you have to deal with. So there's my destination folder. I'm going to put /game in front of it, and then I'm going to put the destination folder there. Then, what I had to do is create a task to load in every one of these textures. Now, a task is an object inside of the UE4 library that handles how to import a various object. So we've got the import. We're going to create a various task, and it gets returned to that. And then we have to use set editor property that explains how to configure this particular task object. So what we're going to do is first we're going to set the automated is equal true. Then we're going to set the destination name is nothing. The destination path is the destination path that we send it. And then the file name is the input file name. And then we're going to say where it says save, we want to make it false, because we don't want it to save just yet, because we still need to configure it yet. Now, once we've created each of these tasks, then what we're going to do is use a helper that Unreal provides for us. We're going to call this helper, we're going to call it Unreal.AssetToolsHelper. Now remember, we did import the Unreal function library here, so it does know what it's talking about. And then the tool we're going to use is getAssetTools, and then import asset task. And then we're going to make sure that task is put inside of a sequence. It's inside of a list. Now, this function, you can load in more than one task at a time. In fact, you could load in a whole bunch of tasks at one time. So that's why we're sending it a sequence of tasks or a list of tasks. In this situation, it's just one task, so it's just surrounded by square brackets. Okay, if it could not do that, here is one final bail where it says could not find the file, and then it would return blank. All right, let's test to see if this is all working. Now drop in here. Gonna hit enter. Aha, we have an error. Okay, invalid character in identifier line 6. Oh, okay, I know what happened. because I'm copying and pasting these, I accidentally put in the wrong quotes in here, so this is a syntax error. I should have figured it out before. So let's try this once again. Oh yeah, by the way, in order to get the last command, I'm just putting the cursor inside of my Python command window and hitting the up key. And that calls in the last command called, and then I'm just hitting enter. Aha, it did a whole bunch of stuff. Now this is just output from the UE4, so let's go check out to see what it did. If we go to the content browser, we'll see that it created a new folder called guard, because that's where we told it to go to. Okay, now if we go and look inside guard, there we see our 3 textures that we loaded. Notice that they haven't been saved yet because they have this little star asterisk next to it, and it says, hey bud, I haven't stored these yet, but let's take a look at one of them and see what it needs to be done. So let's look at the pause. Okay, there's the information, and when it says the compression setting, you'll see that it's HDR for high def resolution, or it's listed as RGB, so it's red, green, and blue. So we do need to change this to the vector displacement. And then if we come down here to look at the filter, we see it's default from the texture group. We want to make sure that it is the nearest. Okay, so these are all the configurations that we're going to have to do for every one of these textures that we bring in. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and delete all of these. Click delete, say yes. I want to delete them. I'm going to come back here. So let's go ahead and do the configuration. Okay, so we got the import VAT texture, so we've got that. So what we have to do is once every texture has been loaded in, we have to get its full address. And that's what we're doing here, is we're going to get the texture path, because we're going to call task.getEditorProperty imported object paths. Okay, once we had a successful load, then it loads up our task and then puts information in there, and then we're going to get our information out of there. It says, okay, give me the final path. Then I'm going to call my configure VAT texture, and it could return more than one path. So this returns a sequence or a list of paths. So we're going to make sure to just send it the first one. So that would be square brackets 0. So let's take a look at to see what it's going to take to configure one of these textures. Okay, here we are. Once again, we're going to first thing we're going to try and check out if this asset really does exist. So I'm going to say map. All right, except if this fails, then it's going to catch the signal, and it says could not find the texture, and it's going to give a return, and it's going to finish that out. Then what it's going to do is it's going to take the map object that we just loaded in, and it's going to set the editor property. And so let me make sure this is one line to make it a little bit more readable. We're going to check out the compression settings, and then we're going to have to check out unreal.texturecompressionsettings.tc vector displacement. You're probably going to ask, dude, how did you figure out that it's this big enum? Where does it say that? Okay, well, if you go check out the UE4 documentation, you do look for the Unreal Python API documentation. And so what I'm going to do is look for, I'm going to look for the texture compression settings. Texture compression settings. And then we look in here, it shows what the list of all the various compression settings could be. And so for this, what we need is the vector displacement map, because that's what we're going to be using it all for. You're probably going, well, dude, that's fine, but how did you know it was texture compression settings? Okay, now this will take a little bit of sleuthing. But I'm going to just type in here texture asset. Unreal Texture. Okay, let's look at to see what an Unreal Texture looks like. And then we'll look down here and you will see that it has one of there it is. There it is. Compression settings. Okay, there it is. And you'll see that it's using a texture compression setting. All right, there it is. So what does this all translate to? So I found the name of the parameter that we want to manipulate. And we tell us, okay, what has to go into it. Now we found out what has to go into it by we did a search on texture compression settings. But what about this compression setting? All right, what we have to do in order to do that, we have to call set editor property in order to set one of the properties for our object. So it's not, I mean, it is object oriented, but there's a few hoops and whistles that we got to dive through. And so here it is, compression settings is the one we want, and then the value for it is Unreal Texture Compression.tc vector displacement. That's the one we want. All right, that will convert our texture from a color to a vector, and then we're going to do something very similar for the filter. Now if we go and look up our filter, see, do we have anything on here for the properties? Oh yeah, filter. Okay, now we have to look for the texture filter. Okay, now this is also looking for another special UE4 enum. So I'm going to look at texture filter. I'm going to drop that in there. And there it is, Unreal Texture Filter. And then there it is. We want the bilinear, the default, the nearest, and the trilinear. And okay, we want the nearest, so we can type TF nearest. And there it is, texture filter.tf nearest. Okay, now that sets it. Now this last thing we're going to have to do is we're going to save it. I want to save the asset so it is ready to rock and roll. And so once again, we have to use one of the tools that are given to us by the editor asset library. That's that special library we had to include into the plugins, because if you don't do that, then it's not going to be able to save. Okay, now what we're going to have to do is we're calling this asset library module. We want to say save asset. Then we want to save our object, and then only if is dirty equals false. Okay, so by setting this parameter only if is dirty, that means save over it regardless. No matter what you do, go ahead and save. Now, some people like to only save if they're dirty or if it's been changed, so then it'll do it then. But in this situation, I'm going to say, yeah, go ahead and then save everything. All right. I'm going to hit Control S to save. Then we're going to, oh, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and make sure it's gone. All right. I'll click in here, hit enter. All right, so it is processing and it pulled in all of these textures. So let's take a look at our guard folder. Now look at that. The little stars are gone, so that means they've been saved. So let's go ahead and look at our guard waving texture now. If we look at the compression setting, we see that it does say it's vector displacement. So that means it is now a vector and not a color. Now let's double check for the filter, and it should say nearest. Okay, we've got the nearest setting for that, and the object's been saved. So these textures are good to go. Sweetness. Okay, the next thing we have to do is that we have to start reading in the mesh. Now the reading of the mesh is basically the same thing we have to do, but believe it or not, there's more tasks to be done. Meshes are a little bit more funky because there's multiple kinds of mesh. You have your static mesh, and then you have your skeletal mesh. For what I want to do is I'm just going to breed in just a static mesh because that's what VAT pulls in. Now I realize that there are a bunch of other options that we're kind of skipping over and just going for a very generic case. But for this situation, I'm just keeping it nice and simple, and then I'll explain more next week because I won't have to explain the setup process next week, and hopefully we can go on a little bit faster. So I'm going to go in, just as we said, we created an import textures command way back down here. Then I'm going to create something very similar to say import meshes. Okay, let's stay with the theme here. Now let's go ahead and create our little function. Now, keeping things as parallel as possible, I'm going to keep it just like my import textures. Okay, first I'm going to get the meshes folder, and then I'm going to test to make sure that this folder is valid or not. So let's see if this all works and see if it actually does generate a mesh folder. So I'm going to click on save, going back to my output log, hit enter. Okay, everything processed, nothing complained. We have all our information in here. Okay, excellent, very good. So now let's go ahead and figure out what it's going to take to import all these meshes. Now, like the textures, the Houdini VAT process will export more than one mesh on occasion. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure to bring in all of the meshes. So I'm going to ask the operating system to give me all the contents of this folder, of my meshes folder. Okay, there it's the operating system is going to give me a full list of all my meshes. Then for each mesh inside of my meshes list, I'm going to create a mesh path, and then I'm going to print out the value of that mesh path, just as, once again, a little bit of a test to make sure that everything is working properly. I'm going to test it, click up. Okay, everything's working fine. If we go to the content browser, we go to the geometry, and then you see it has a folder. Oh, wrong place. I wanted to go to content. I want to go to guard. Okay, we have the information right in here. Not a problem. I'm going to go to content. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and remove guard. Hit delete card and go yes. Okay, we are good to go. Now let's actually go ahead and go through the process of importing this. So how do we import one particular VAT mesh? Okay, now it is a little bit more complicated to bring in a static mesh, but that's what we're going through, and this is why I've done the work for you ahead of time. Okay, I'm going to drop this function in here. All right, I've got my import VAT mesh, I've got my file name, and then my destination. So I'm going to check out my destination path will be /game/ my destination folder. This is exactly what we did with our textures. And then the first thing we're going to do is we're going to create our task. We're going to have Unreal create a task for us. We're going to say automated equals true. Our destination name is nothing. The destination path is our destination underscore path is our destination path, our file name, and then the save as false. Okay, this is exactly what we did in before. Now things are going to start to get a little bit weird because we're going to be pulling this in from FBX. Now I'm assuming that we're pulling in from FBX just to keep things simple. Now it is possible if you are using a Vertex texture, a Vertex cache sequence from another package, maybe like from 3D Studio Max, then you may not be working with FBX. You might be working with, who knows, you might be working with OBJs, or you might be working with USDs or something like that. All right, that's for another case. We're just keeping it simple here. We're just working with simple FBXs. And so we have to create a separate FBX options object. And so we're going to ask Unreal to create one of those objects for us. And then we're going to put those FBX options inside of an options slot inside of our task. So yeah, we created some options and then we put those options inside of our options slot. Okay, So now let's go ahead and load up our FBX options. So we're going to import the mesh as true. We're going to import the textures as true. We're going to import as a skeletal mesh. We're going to say false because we don't want that. And we're going to import the materials true. So if it's got materials, we want to go ahead and import them. All right, now specifically for static meshes, we have to do something a little bit more complicated. And I'm going to give myself just a little bit more space here. Okay, we're going to tell it to combine meshes. We want that to be false. So if we've got more than one mesh, we want to make sure that they are brought in as multiple objects. That's very important, especially when we're dealing with a simulation with multiple objects. And then we're going to generate the light map UVs. We're going to set that to true. All right, now these are the extra components that need to be done. Like I said, quite a few more steps in order for bringing in a FBX static object, static mesh. All right, now we're going to use the same assets tool helper. We're going to load in our asset task, and once again, we're going to put in our task as a member of a sequence or a member of a list, because we've got to make sure that we can bring in more than one task. Now, could we have loaded in all of the textures and all of the static meshes? Well, as long as each has its own separate task, the answer is yes. So we can load them up. Now, why am I not doing this? Because honestly, folks, I get confused. I bear of little brain here. I like to keep things nice and simple. So therefore, my code is brain dead simple. Then what we're going to do is load in this asset. And then if we were unsuccessful loading in the asset, I'm going to print out a could not find file. All right, now I'll click on here. Go back to my output log. I'm going to use the last expression. Okay, there we got a warning. It says something about smooth groups. Okay, very cool. And the smoothing group then got sent to the message log. Okay, I think it worked, folks. And you'll see that it says, okay, static mesh. It brought in a static mesh. So we go to the content browser, go to guard. Okay, here's our textures, and lo and behold, here is our static mesh. There he is, gang. Okay, let's park this right up there. Okay, there he is in his full-blown glory. He doesn't have any material associated with it yet, but that's okay. We're going to build one for him. And what we want to do is we want to turn on the high precision UVs. Okay, we want the fullest, best information for our UV parameterization, so we need to turn this as on, and then we need to save the object. Now, when we turn this on and save the object, UE4 is kind of squirrely, and it does this little kind of like dance around do-si-do. Let's click this on, so we go ahead and save. Yes, okay, it says it's saved, but when we go ahead and close this window, it says it's not saved. It says, would you like to save it then? You say yes. And then we click on here, and you see that it's not saved. And we just have to go ahead and click here and save again. Okay, that's kind of nonsensical. Hopefully, this script takes care of this all for us. So we click on content. I'm going to get rid of my guard folder. So let's go ahead. Yes, we've gone ahead and we've imported the mesh. So let's go ahead and import and configure the sequence. All right, so just as we did for the textures, we're going to go ahead and once we've loaded in the object, I'm going to get the path from UE4. Say, okay, UE4, give me the path of the object that I just created. And then I'm going to configure my VAT Mesh. And then, just to be consistent, I'm going to return my mesh path. Just in case I might want to return that somehow. Okay, I'm going to return my mesh path, and I'm going to return the sequence here. I'm going to return the 0th mesh path. We only want is one mesh path, and so the result from get editor property is a list. and we're just going to return just a single component from that list, the first one. All right, now let's go ahead and create our configure VAT mesh. All right, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to try to load the mesh. So make sure, once again, that everything is working as expected. So we're going to say, okay, UE4, give me the mesh. So give me the pointer to the mesh. And if it doesn't find it, then I'm going to print could not find the mesh, and then I'm going to return it unsuccessful. Now what we have to do is we have to tell this we want the mesh build settings. I'm going to assign this to MBS. Mesh build settings is, once again, yet another Unreal object that is used to set things with. And so we're going to set the property. We're going to use useful precisions, UVs. We're going to set that to be true. And then we're going to use our editor static mesh library. And then we're going to set the LOD build settings. And here is our mesh object. And then we have to tell it which LOD that we want. Now, by default, we're going to make sure that it's 0. But what I should have done is typed in here my LOD equals 0. And then I'm going to put that right here, my LOD. Okay, so that we make sure that we're loading in the 0th element, or we want the 0th level of detail. And then we're going to send it our mesh build setting as the option. Then once we get done configuring our options, we're going to go ahead and then save it. And then we're going to do it the exact same way that we saved every one of the textures. We're going to save the object, and then only if dirt is dirty, we're going to set that equal to false. All right, let's go ahead and test. Hit enter. Okay. Now it said that it gave us all this gobbledygook, and it said it manipulated all this stuff, so let's take a look at what we've got. We'll click over here into guard, and there is our guard object, and you'll notice that he has been saved. Very nice. Let's double click to go inside, and we click on full precision UVs. You'll see that it has been turned on for us. So this guard is ready to rock and roll. We are good to go. Okay, so this character's its import assets are just pretty fine and ready to go, and we are full to go. Okay, that pretty much wraps up what I wanted to cover today. We imported the fundamental assets from our Houdini VAT export. Next week, what we're going to do is go over how to build the materials automatically for us. Now, I haven't tried this before, so we'll have to wait and see what happens. Maybe I'll get done in time, maybe I won't. I've been pretty busy here at the University of Central Florida FIA lately, but you know, that's my job as a teacher. So that's what we're going to do next week, is build the materials with this information. All right, cool. So let's get things wrapped up here. Okay, so tune in next week, and that's going to be like the 14th of May for another episode of Houdini Secrets Live, and then we're going to give part 2 of our VAT importer. Now, if all goes well, that's all we're going to need, and we're just going to be able to just drop in our object, good to go, and we should be ready to go and have it work like stink. That is off. All goes well. Okay, gang, here's another thing. In case you didn't know, I am the proprietor or the manager for the Orlando Houdini Users Group. Now, I realize Orlando, that's not a powerhouse of Houdini users. You know, Houdini's around the world, right? But what's in Orlando other than Mickey Mouse? Not a whole lot. But I'm doing what I can to build up a substantial and a loyal Houdini following. So therefore, we got the Orlando Houdini group, users group going. So I'm inviting the entire world to go into meetup.org and check out the Orlando Houdini Users Group and join us online for our next session. And our next session is going to be meeting number 8, and it's going to be the 26th of May. Now that's going to be a Wednesday, and it's going to be at 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Okay, you're probably going, okay, it's going to be during lunchtime on Wednesday. Okay, yeah, we can probably do that. You know, people are that. You know, if you're working on the West Coast, then that means it's 9 o'clock. So you might want to tune in, like when your managers are not looking, because then they're not going to see you. But it's really important that you're going to want to come and see this session, because we've got side effects as, oh gosh, I'm going to mess up his name. I apologize. Simon Verstrate. Or he's from Belgium, so it's Verstrate. I don't know the name. I'm going to have to ask Simon what is the proper way of pronouncing his name. But in case you haven't looked at or saw his information on ArtStation, or if you've been to the Side Effects website, Simon's stuff is all over the place, and he is one of the resident experts on world building. And he's going to come and give a presentation to our Houdini users group. And what he's going to do is he's going to go over some industry examples of what he's doing. He's going to show how to create some terrain. He's going to show a little bit about using asset placement, and he's going to be using standard importing through FBX, and he's going to be using Houdini Engine. He's going to show how to very primitively hook up, create cities, and he's going to go into some of the more complex issues of Houdini Engine. And he's going to show other industry examples as well. So this is going to be a really important session. This is free for everybody, and it's open to the entire world. So do what you can. Drop into the Orlando Houdini Users Group. Go and check out and get the link by signing up at meetup.org, and drop in and see what's going on. If you have any problems hooking up, contact me. That's Chris, or it's Chris at chrisrota.com, or it's Chris at techartedu.com. And drop me a line, and I'll make sure that you get in, or you get put in properly. All right. Now, if you liked what you saw today, go ahead and subscribe to this YouTube channel. Go ahead and hit that lower left corner. Go ahead and hit that darn subscribe button before you forget. I know I forget, so hit it right now, daggone it. All right. Otherwise, check me out. I'm Chris Rota. You can see me on Facebook and on LinkedIn. Or if you want to, go check out TechArtEDU, which is also on Facebook and on LinkedIn. And if you really want to help me, go to the TechArtEDU website, which is this location. That's techartedu.com. And go ahead and opt in for our newsletter. That means you're just going to give me your email address. I'm going to make sure that once I do start sending out emails and start sending out newsletters again, I will actually send it off to you, and then you'll begin to know, like, okay, like, that's cool, but how do I find out how to get in with Simon? That sounds like a really cool idea. Or if you want to find more about what's going on with the Houdini the Houdini Secrets Live, or if you want to hear more about some of the other things that we're doing, like we are creating the real-time visual effects for technical artists. Okay, that book is coming out later this year, and so we're just putting up the wrappings on it right now. In fact, if any of you out there are familiar with Houdini and UE4, and you want to help me with some of the images, contact me, Chris at techartedu.com, and I will be glad to give you some services. Depending on how much you contribute, I can pay you per image that you create, or I might even be able to pay you with a Houdini license in lieu of your services. Now, I know it's not a tremendous amount of money, but here's a way for you to pick up your own indie Houdini license for a year, and all you have to do is crank out a bunch of images for me, and you should be good to go. Sweet deal, right? Yes. Okay, I need the help. My publisher is going to wring my neck because I'm so late with this book. All right, in addition to my book of visual effects, we're also going to be coming out with Procedural Gems. Now, Procedural Gems is a collection of interviews that I've done with people around the industries of proceduralists around the world and gave them a quick interview. And so these are the transcribing of all of these interviews put into one ebook fashion. And this will be available from the techartedu.com website. All of the interviews have been taken. All of the interviews have been transcribed. I just need to put it together. But right now I'm really focusing on getting the visual effects book finished and out the door first. And then once that happens, we're going to put together procedural gems, get that done, out the door. Okay, you can't find out about all this unless you tune in and hear me blathering all the time. Or you can get those emails from TechArtEDU and you won't even have to do anything. Sounds sweet, right? Okay, cool. So I look forward to meeting all of you next week when we go with part 2 for our VAT import function. And this will be on the 14th of May. And until then, have a great week. Bye.